I want you to understand something most people only realize after they've already changed. Raising your standards doesn't just change your relationships, it changes your identity, and that's why it feels uncomfortable at first. Even lonely, even unfamiliar. Because the moment you stop accepting what drains you, you don't just filter people out of your life, you start filtering out an older version of yourself. There was a version of you who tolerated more than she should have, not because she lacked intelligence, but because she associated patience with love and endurance with loyalty. She stayed in dynamics where she had to over-explain herself. She gave second chances to behavior that never actually improved. She accepted emotional inconsistency and called it understanding him. And in that version of life, your standards were flexible, adjustable, dependent on who you were dealing with. But flexible standards always come with a hidden cost. You slowly lose your internal reference point. You stop asking, "Is this aligned with me?" and start asking, "Can I handle this?" That shift changes everything. The trigger is not always a breakup. Sometimes it's exhaustion. Sometimes it's emotional burnout. Sometimes it's the quiet realization that you are constantly negotiating your peace just to maintain access to someone. And then something inside you shifts. Not loudly, but clearly. You stop reacting the same way. You stop explaining yourself repeatedly. You stop chasing clarity from people who consistently avoid giving it. And for the first time, your internal discomfort becomes louder than your emotional attachment. That's the moment your standards begin to rise. Raising your standards doesn't feel powerful in the beginning. It feels like loss. Because suddenly, you don't overtext anymore. You don't over-explain anymore. You don't chase anymore. You don't soften your boundaries just to keep someone comfortable. And when you stop doing all of that, some people start falling away. Not because you became difficult, but because you stopped being convenient. And this is where the discomfort begins. Because you realize something unexpected. A lot of your past relationships were sustained by your willingness to adjust, not by mutual effort. So when you stop adjusting, the dynamic can't survive unchanged. But that's not a collapse. That's clarity. Here's what no one tells you about raising your standards. You don't just lose access to certain people, you lose access to the version of you who accepted them. And that's why you become unrecognizable. Not because you changed into someone new, but because you stopped performing emotional self-abandonment to maintain connection. You start speaking differently. You move differently. You choose differently. You no longer confuse inconsistency with potential. You no longer confuse attention with intention, and most importantly, you no longer confuse being chosen with being valued. At this stage, your life becomes quieter in some ways, but clearer in every way that matters. Because the noise was never love, it was tolerance, and when tolerance ends, truth begins. So when you raise your standards, don't expect applause. Expect adjustment, expect resistance, expect silence from people who benefited from your flexibility, but also expect something far more important, self-respect that no longer needs external validation to feel real. Because the moment your standards rise for good, you don't go back. Not because you can't, but because you finally recognize what it cost you to stay the way you were.